Working on this little white here. One of the issues is the starter every once in a while will grind and not throw out all the way. The Bendix doesn't throw out all the way. And that's been a recurring problem on this thing ever since, well, we split this thing, did a ring gear, had the starter rebuilt, and even then it was still skipping every once in a while. And anyway, so long story short, I put a start solenoid on it now, so that all the power to run that the starter solenoid is not going through the key switch. So now the key switch will engage the start solenoid. The start solenoid pulls power directly from the battery cable and feeds it right into the signal wire. So it should get full voltage 100% of the time. That'll help throw that Bendix out all the way. So hopefully that'll solve that problem. And it's an MFWD, so we got a leaking front wheel seal. We'll get that oil out of there and see if we can get this leaking seal fixed in here today. The customer sent along this special tool, which is awesome, because normally I have to build stuff like this when I don't have the right ones. So evidently this has been a part before. Okay, so we got a little bit of kind of grimy bits inside here. But that's okay, we'll wash that out, not a big deal. Don't worry about these pieces of threads, I'll weld them back on later. Haha, just kidding, that's just Loctite from the nut. Little pieces there. And coming over to this seal, and it's always the same thing almost. Baler twine. Baler twine is the curse of MFWDs. Oh, curse you, baler twine. Get out of there! Well, this is what happens, you know, you get them apart and start cleaning things up, and then all of a sudden, oh, look at that. This bearing is toast. Those rollers are all pitted. I can't put it back together like that. And of course the same thing here, you can see all the pitting everywhere on that race, so no, we need more parts now. I gotta get this bearing off of there, but look at how tight that is. Like, you can't really pull on the cage with a splitter. I mean, yeah, that does usually work, but you always wind up wrecking everything, and sometimes you have to try it like 3 times to get that inner race off once you bust the cage off. But this is one of those times where the engineers did what they were supposed to do, in my opinion. Look at what they did for me. They put these screw holes here. These are actually threaded holes, there and there. And you can see the race right in behind there. So all I have to do is blow this dry, put a couple of bolts in there, and just zip, 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 and off it comes. Isn't that nice? Thank you, Mr. Engineer. It's either going to come off easy or it won't. Got to be a little bit careful though, because if I pull my trigger on my D-wall too hard, it'll screw those screws right through the wall over there. So we'll try and take it a bit easy here. Yeah, I ran out of screw, ran out of bolt. There we go, I just took it off the rest of the way with a punch. There it is. Man, I like it when they do that. That's very handy. But that thing is on there very tight too, so we'll be heating that one up when we put the new one on. So all of these pieces look really nice, except for these bearings. You can see how they're pitted. If I can get a good angle there. And these rollers are in really bad shape. If I can get it to focus, there we go. They're just very badly pitted. And then actually this one here, this guy actually has like chunks out of it already. So yeah, I was a little bit surprised to see that. The rollers on this one are not too bad, but just the chunks out of the race. I wasn't expecting that. All right, we got that seal surface all cleaned up and everything's clean and ready to go back together now. Got these surfaces cleaned up. There it is. All right, so we had a whole bunch of trouble with this front end here. Put new bearings on it, and then when we went to tighten up the wheel bearings, there's just way too much play in that front hub. And so then we got these shims in there. So take a shim out, and then it's way too tight. Can't tighten the nut up. And so took a long time to figure out what was going on, but the new bearings are the same part number as the old bearings, but they're making them actually wider. So that puts a bigger space between those bearings, and it's wider by 1 millimeter, and these shims are 2 millimeter shims. So if you leave one shim out, it's a millimeter too tight, and if you put both shims in, it's a millimeter too loose. So there are only 2 millimeter shims available, so either we had to get new shims made, or we had to get the spacer that goes in between machined. And so that's what we wound up doing, was we had the spacer machined 1 millimeter off, then we can leave one of the shims off and we get the right space. And so now, with the nut all torqued up on there, we got no play and just a nice bit of preload on here. It's just exactly the way it should be. So that's a problem solved. Took a little bit of figuring to get that one though. The hub was all chewed up here, so I just finished putting a Speedi-Sleeve on. That Speedi-Sleeve, it's a bit of an odd size. I had to special order that thing. It's pretty big too. But to put it on there was a little bit of a job. Those sleeves, they usually come with these tools to press them on, but well, that's not going to work. So I had to figure out a way to get that thing on there. I probably could have cut this out and then hammered all the way around the edges, but those Speedi-Sleeves, if they don't go on perfectly straight, they stretch and then they never will sit tight. Ask me how I know. So I wandered around here trying to find something that would fit over top of that Speedi-Sleeve, and I was having trouble finding something. You know, sometimes when I'm doing diagnostics on tractors and stuff, you cut the oil filters open to see if you have bearing material in that engine oil filter, or if you got a bunch of metal in the hydraulic oil filter. And whenever I do that, I always keep those filter casings. I don't usually throw them away because they can be useful. Like I got one in here for my floor dry. Makes a nice scooper. Sometimes I build mufflers out of them. I keep all those pieces because if you need a small engine muffler or something, you can build one out of that stuff pretty easy. But today, I found this one in my box. RE572785. That's a very common four-wheel drive John Deere hydraulic filter, transmission filter. And it just so happens that that thing fits beautifully over top of that sleeve. So I was able to tap it on with an old oil filter. So that's fun. Put a little bearing mount on there just to make sure that it's going to seal up and stay glued on there. Tapped it on, worked really nice, and now we have a nice, beautifully machined surface to replace that pitted, worn out stuff that was in there. And hopefully that seal won't leak anymore. Okay, planetaries are back together. They're filled up. Fresh 8090. And I guess I can put those wheels and stuff back on. There we have it. Wheels are back on, spacers are back on, torqued up, fresh 8090 in both hubs. Everything went together very nice once we got that bearing stuff figured out, and so the front end is done.